Let me ask you this. I'll sort of go on to a different topic. So you had your I guess we can call it a societal hiatus. Um, when you got back, did you like notice anything different? Because I guess like these incremental changes that happen with your interactions with people or society or whatever, not kind of not aware of on the day to day. But when you're kind of on hiatus for a few years and then you come back, was there anything in your day to day interactions with people that kind of jumped out as dramatically different to you?
Actually, there's one thing I'll mention. So when I was in prison, this is the least woke environment you can ever see. And when I went into prison, I was considered this anti-woke rebel that was kind of a little, maybe even dangerous, the way I was thinking and talking. And I went into prison, and you can't imagine, I can't even say some of the stuff that I'm thinking, that this is not a place for tolerance and wokeness. And I would explain to people like, no, trans is a thing, and you have to use pronouns in certain situations and things like that. And people would say, doing that, Martin, you're crazy. What are you talking about? I said, no, that's the way the world is out there. And if you want a corporate job, you have to act like this, and you have to say this, and you have to respect this and that. And they were like, nah, you're nuts, Martin. You're a this or you're a that. And I said, no, you don't understand. The world looks at me as a rebel. So if you're not thinking that what I'm saying is palatable, then you're really even further a rebel than I am. And some of these people said, no, I don't care. And I came out of prison, and I've seen that again, I'm pro-LGBT person. I respect trans rights. I have a lot of friends in the LGBT community that are some of my dearest friends. And if someone wants to identify as their gender, I respect that. I maybe didn't fully respect that many years ago, but I do now. And there's a lot of science behind this. It's interesting. We won't go off on that tangent. But the point is that when I came out of prison, it's one thing for LGBT community, but even things like more of the woke stuff on the sort of extreme side that you see in the corporate world sometimes with diversity, inclusion, and equity, and other sort of the wokeisms of that get very extreme. I've seen that kind of recede a bit. That when I went into prison in 2017, there was this peak wokeism, and that's sort of died down. That people are like, a lot of this stuff was overdone, and that we have to learn to live with each other and not get too sort of caught up in microaggression training and stuff like that. That some of the stuff is just kind of gonna live. We have to live and let live, and I'm kind of happy that that's happened. And that's the perception that I have. I could be dead wrong, and it's gotten worse and crazier in some ways. But I think that there aren't too many people fighting over should there be 2 bathrooms or 3 bathrooms or this and that. Like that world is probably fading away into the back picture. That's sort of the one thing I'd say.
I think one of the big things now is the whole, people trying to like attack and undermine a child's sense of reality and who they are, and encouraging them to get like these irreversible life altering treatments. That is something that, I can't think of many more abominable actions than to do that to a child. And then you have these parents who are just kind of, experimenting on their children to show how progressive they are. And I mean, that is something that, and again, like any adult who does what, who is of sound mind, because in order to exercise self-ownership, you kind of have to have you have to kind of be playing with a full deck, so to speak. So anybody who can exercise self-ownership and chooses to do whatever, totally respect it. It's fine. Okay. But when you start destabilizing impressionable children and then they, get some treatment and they can't go back, that I have a huge problem with that.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. And I think that that's the last bastion of wokeism that's probably dying. I think most people, left, right, whatever, they agree with you. And that fringe, that super fringe that had a big voice over the last 5 or 10 years, that fringe their voice is dropping. And I think people are getting back to reality, getting back to, for example, that's, I think, like you said, abominable. But let's talk about something that's less intense, like safe spaces and stuff like that. Like people are starting to say, all right, look, let's not, get really upset over small things. There's a Google programmer who got fired for writing this very intelligent, thought. It wasn't a popular thought. he's not a crazy guy. He works at Google. He wrote up this whole thing. He said maybe there are less programmers at Google who are women because of reasons other than, the obvious. And in other words, that there's some systematic suppression of women in programming or something like that. And he got fired. And I didn't think what he said was like totally wrong. I think he is a little wrong, but some of the stuff he said is worth thinking about and worth talking about. And I think that the environment's starting to shift, where like Dave Chappelle is the people at Netflix. I think 5 years ago they would have fired him, but now the people at Netflix says, you know what? We're not going to fire this guy. We're going to keep him going. And if you want to walk out of Netflix because you don't like it, then walk out. And I think 3 people quit. And the company just starts, all right, whatever. What's next? And I think I'm glad that like this like brinksmanship of like, no, let's get more woke. Let's get more woke. That we're starting to walk that back and say, all right, there's a limit to this stuff. I think we should respect if somebody wants to be called a certain pronoun. I respect that. I think other people should. But to your point, I mean, some of the stuff that's really extreme and some of the really super sensitive, stuff like that. I personally think coming out of prison, like I see people being a little more cool and a little bit more like, okay, I kind of understand like people are going to be people and you can't force people to feel a certain way or force people to be, this sensitive. So like the toxic masculinity thing is sort of starting to fade into the background, and more people are saying, you know what, maybe it's okay to be masculine. Maybe it's okay for, like a lot of women tell me all the time, Martin, I just want to be a mom. Like and I'm afraid to say that. And I think like more and more women are being able to stand up and say, you know what, this life is not for me. I want to be just a mother that takes care of a family. And I hear that more and more and see that more and more on Twitter. And I think that's a good thing.
And that's such an important component of a healthy society, is for, parents to actually be raising their own children. And yeah, nurturing the next generation of human consciousness on this planet, is way more important than like climbing up the corporate ladder at Starbucks. Like how, I have my sort of speculations on the origins of all the stuff that, women are, because I think women are kind of in a difficult place because they got biology telling them one thing, and then they have society telling them something that's antithetical to what their biology is telling them. And I think that puts them in a really challenging situation, to the point where they, you've heard the story before, the women who miss their window of fertility, and then, you're 40, you don't have kids, and you're going to live to be at least 80. Like that's a long time to live, having missed out on, one of the, if not the best aspect of life in general. So it's tough for women, not in the way that most people would say it's tough for women, but I think it's tough for women in that respect.
Well, I've gone out of my way to support women executives, paying them, as much as I can that the market will bear and make sense, and promoting them. And a lot of the people that wrote to my judge in my sentencing were my women executives who had done so much better than they ever thought they would. And I enjoy helping the underdog achieve their goals. At the same time, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I do think like raising a family is a harder job and a more important job than any job we do in corporate world. And, that's changed a bit. Again, the corporate rat race is something that I think more and more families are deciding may not be for them. And more and more people, women specifically, who have this unique role as the one birth giver that can do that role. And again, I'm not a traditionalist. I think women should be able to do and will do and cannot be stopped from doing whatever they want. But at the same time, there is that elephant in the room. So, I think, again, wokeism is sort of starting to die its death. It doesn't mean that it'll completely go away. But I do think that's the one change in society that I can sort of point to that is not such a bad thing. And I do think like I've found myself in this paradoxical position where people have said, oh, Shkreli, you've gone soft and stuff like that. And I'm like, I haven't changed. I stand for what's right in certain situations, and I will condemn what I feel is wrong in other situations. And, to your point about, sort of this weird, situation where 6-year-olds are being asked what their gender is, stuff like that. It's uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable for I think 99% of society. I think it's that weird sort of 1% that's so ultra progressive that that voice again I think has gone from being really loud to now people are sort of telling that voice to, kind of cool it.
Gotcha.